Usala Media, bringing you the best programming.
Estamos en Usala Media, en un foro para los candidatos a fiscal de distrito. El señor Carlos Vega está con nosotros aquí para responder algunas preguntas sobre su candidatura a fiscal de distrito. Él salió de la oficina de fiscal en el 2018 y es ahora uno de los candidatos. We are in Usala Media, in a forum for the candidates to DA. Mr. Carlos Vega left the DA's office in 2018, and he is now a candidate for DA. Señor Vega?
And I'm running for the office of district attorney now.
Okay. Among other things, my name is Fernando Mendez, and I'm doing this interview of the candidates with my colleague, Drew Murray. And so I'll let Drew begin the questioning.
All right, thank you, Fernando. So we're going to get right into it. The first question. One of the most important topics constituents want to hear about is the current murder rate in the city of Philadelphia. In 2016, there were 277 murders in Philadelphia. The final total in 2020 was 499, representing an increase of 80%, and more murders than any other year in the past 30 years. To date, there have been 89 murders in the city of Philadelphia, an increase of 33% from 2020. Certainly one can point to the pandemic as a reason for an increase in homicide, but numbers were increasing in the 2 years prior to the pandemic. Over those same 2 years, poverty in Philadelphia, although high, was down from approximately 25% to 23%. Assuming there is an undeniable correlation between poverty and violent crime, why did the murder skyrocket in the 2 years prior to the pandemic if poverty had decreased? And as a follow-up, as district attorney, what will you do to reverse the skyrocketing murder rate?
Okay. Well, it's one issue, people saying that poverty causes violence. And absolutely, there are neighborhoods of color where there are no opportunity, that there is violence there. But to paint someone who is poor, who lives in an impoverished neighborhood, to say they turn to crime is unacceptable. I myself was poor, my family was poor, and we did not turn to a life of crime. As we see in our neighborhoods, people work very hard to achieve a certain standard of living. And although they don't have those jobs or those opportunities, they work very hard to give their children an opportunity to get out of that situation. In terms of addressing the gun violence, how it has skyrocketed, I've done the statistics and seen it, and what it is an issue of accountability. There is a large number of illegal guns. And during the past year, 2020, the police have taken off the street a record number of illegal guns, well over 2,000 illegal guns.
Well, the second question we have for you is, over the last few years, the term criminal justice reform has been used to bring attention to the over-incarceration of people in the United States, especially individuals of color. What policies would you implement or continue in order to reduce the number of people incarcerated for low-level and non-violent crimes?
Well, the issue is this, and they paint this with a broad brush of saying mass incarceration. We have to address this issue properly and responsibly, which is people who commit violent crime in our community, it has to be addressed because you have to make our community safe. But there are those individuals who do not commit violent crimes. They're committing crimes not because they're bad people, but because of a lack of opportunity or the circumstances in their life. I'll use the example of my growing up in New York. My family had a bodega. So we were victims of crime in terms of burglaries and gunpoint robberies. But by the same token, I grew up with a lot of young people that I went to school with that were very intelligent, very talented, but the streets ate them up because of one, drugs, heroin was big then, and second, lack of opportunity. They didn't know they had other alternatives to not turn to crime. So when you talk about reform, I address that in those people who are victims of their environment. We could lend out that hand to help them by affording them opportunity. That's why I would go with the focused deterrence program, which addresses the issue of making people safe and addressing children who are at risk of being hurt, harmed, or committing a crime, showing them opportunities that there are other alternatives in terms of education, vocational training, and bringing in community leaders as well as the business community to show that there are alternatives to, going to a life of crime or trying to feed your family or yourself by selling drugs or something like that. There are other avenues, but we need to have our business community take part in that.
All right, next question is in relation to victims' rights. Topic that is important to many people is victim rights. On May 5th, 2018, Mike Pong was shot during what looked like a robbery attempt. Further evidence showed that the shooter, Javon Patterson, had told a neighbor his intention to hurt Mr. Pong because he was tired of his mouth and something had to be done to him. Under the current district attorney's office, the charge of attempted murder was dropped and a plea deal was made to reduce the charge to aggravated assault. Under Pennsylvania law, victims have the right to be apprised of a plea deal and be heard at sentencing. Mr. Pong was never notified. Another case, the family of a murder victim, Antoine Jackson, was not notified that the person accused of his murder was set free. In the case of Sergeant Robert Wilson, the district attorney's office did not notify the police officer's family of a plea deal until so late in the process that any input would have been meaningless. As district attorney of the city of Philadelphia, the buck stops with the district attorney. As district attorney, what will each of you do? What will you do, Carlos, to make sure that victims' rights are not violated?
Well, having spent 35 years in the district attorney's office and 30 years in the homicide unit as the first Latino in that unit, we had a culture that we represented the victims. In fact, we didn't call them victims, we called them family. And what we always did prior to the current administration, the family was addressed every step of the way. With every file, there was an index card saying notify your family, at which point the DA was required to call that family, give them their phone number, and keep them apprised of everything that was going on. And with respect to plea deals, and although some families may disagree what the plea deal is, we would afford them the respect of saying, these are the facts in the case, this is the law, and that's why we had to offer this plea deal. You have to give that family the respect. We also have to make sure we talk to the family if someone is going to be let out, which is, I've heard the saying, like, we couldn't find the people. I started in 1982, before ATMs, before cell phones, before anything. And I was always able to find that family and talk to them, even if I had to send a police car there. Now we have cell phones, we have a computer in our pocket. It is inexcusable. I can't find you, talk to you, and explain to you what is going on in the process. So there is a program in the federal system where the prosecutor's office fails to notify that family. There are consequences to that, being taken to the district board or fined. Within Pennsylvania, although there are victims' rights, there are no teeth to that legislation when someone violates those rights. I would have my legislators unit go to Harrisburg and make sure there are some teeth. That way there is ramifications that should a DA not perform their function, it is addressed.
Okay, thank you. I think we're time for a question from a resident from Zoom. So
you will know one of those,
well, no, we're gonna bring someone in from Zoom to ask a question to Carlos. So Danny, we are ready for a Zoom question for Carlos. So we're running out of time. So how about we just ask one more question from ours, and then we're just going to have to do we're going to have to skip the residents' question on this part of the forum.
Well, the one question that we have a couple of questions that we don't have enough time. But one is bail reform. What is your opinion on
Well, with the bail reform and technology has moved up, it's archaic, but I have to work now within the system I have. What I would address that issue with the current administration, if you read the New York Times article, he has incarcerated more people with bail than any other time, but it's gone upside down in that violent people are being let out as opposed to non-violent people who don't pose a threat of safety are being kept in. What I would do is, with respect to the individuals who are not committing crimes that are violent, I would have no cash bail. They don't have to pay bail. But those who are posing a danger to our community, having guns, selling drugs, shooting, they have to have bail. I see with the current administration, they ask for no bail to $1 million bail. And that is doing a one size fits all. Each individual is a person, and you have to look at their records individually, their age, their ties to the community, what their prior record is, and ask for an appropriate bail. Not you're asking for $1 million just because you want to, or nothing. You know, you have to address the individual because they are presumed innocent, but we also have to take and be responsible to keep our community safe. Now, in the meantime, working with that system, we're in the 21st century. We're doing Zoom now. I think we could have a system, and it would be less to have a monitor system, to put someone on a monitor that we can see where those individuals are, as opposed to putting them in prison and we're feeding them, housing them, and all that. The city can save money. Those individuals are able to be home and maybe work. So we have to go 21st century, but I'll work within the system we have, but I'm going to be an advocate to change that system and go into the 21st century.
All right, thank you, Carlos. I think we're going to wrap up this segment of the candidate forum. So thank you very much. And you're listening to Usual Media.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Señor siguiente de Uso Media, estamos aquí en una edición especial de nuestra emisora con un foro de los candidatos para DA en la ciudad de Filadelfia. We are at Usual Media, the roundtable in the forum for the candidates for DA. Estamos ahora en una conversación con el señor Charles PERUTO. Se puede presentar y introduce yourself, Mr. PERUTO.
Charles PERUTO.
Yes.
All right, we'll get right into it. So the format for anybody watching it is a little different. We thought we were going to have 3 candidates here at the same time. Carlos Vega had a conflict, so he came earlier. We did tape Carlos answering a few questions. Larry KRASNER has not arrived yet. I hope, since he did commit to come, that he does arrive and we can get both of you up here at the same time. But for now, we're just going to get going with some questions. So the first one is in regard to murder. One of the most important topics constituents want to hear about is the current murder rate in the city of Philadelphia. In 2016, there were 277 murders in Philadelphia. The final total in 2020 was 499, representing an increase of 80% and more murders than any other year in the past 30 years. To date, there have been 89 murders in the city of Philadelphia in 2021, an increase of 33% from 2020. Certainly, one can point the pandemic as a reason for an increase in homicide, but numbers were increasing the 2 years prior to the pandemic. Over those same 2 years, poverty in Philadelphia, although high, was down from approximately 25% to 23%. Assuming there is a correlation between poverty and violent crime, why did murder skyrocket in the 2 years prior to the pandemic if poverty has decreased? As district attorney, what will you do to reverse the skyrocketing murder rate?
The answer is very simple why homicides increased. The drug trade. Drug dealers, that's an asset. It is a business. It is a business that the Philadelphia police can't keep up with. And when they do keep up with it, when they do have a large bust, we have the present DA, Mr. KRASNER, the guy that didn't show up, doesn't prosecute them. Any defense lawyer, who's not a barometer, but any defense lawyer will tell you, we used to have drug cases coming out of our ears. They don't exist anymore because they're not being prosecuted, because he looks at the defendants like they're the victims, that they're poor, they need to make money, they have to do something to get out of the ghetto. So it's switched. It's been a big pendulum switch from victims' rights, which we were leaning towards, and now it's defendants' rights. So not crying about it, but lawyers are upset because we're out of business. We literally don't have any cases to defend. Now, on a serious note, when you have a corner, a drug corner that's busy, and they're selling their poison to people on the street, and it goes unchecked, that drug corner is like real estate. You could sell it from one drug dealer to another, literally change hands. They're becoming more valuable because there's less risk. It used to be that the punishment was this big and the profits are this big. Now the profits are this big and the punishment is this big. So if someone wants to infringe on your asset, on your real estate, and they want to take over and not pay for it and just move in, how do they do that? Do they approach you and say, sir, may I have a moment of your time? I'd like to negotiate with you. Or do they go in here and pick out their guns and start shooting the place up? There is a direct correlation between the drug trade and homicides. And we're going to have 650 homicides this year because Larry KRASNER is the district attorney. He's a bleeding heart liberal, which they have their place in society, but not in the district attorney's office. That we are a prosecution unit, not defense lawyers with power, as he stated.
Thank you.
So you mentioned that, as a follow-up to this, Drew's question, you mentioned that we're going to reach a level of 600 homicides, and there's no way to stop that trend?
I didn't say there's no way to stop it, because in my first 2 weeks in office, I'm going to implement something that I'm going to work on from the time I get elected until the time I take office, and that is sit down with the board of judges, which no district attorney has done since Brian Steele. And you sit down with them and say, listen, you want to be serious about helping what I do? Give me 6 judges. So that these 6 judges that I choose are going to man the courts on nothing but gun cases. Gun possession, shootings, anything to do with the gun. These 6 judges will get the message out loud and clear to people who want to take the gun and shoot it down the street in our city, where kids are in danger, business people are in danger. You have to be crazy to do something. I'm going to accommodate you. I'm going to put you in with the rest of the depraved people, because just for carrying a gun without a license, God forbid you shoot it, is 2 years on a first offense, 5 on a second. If you shoot on a public street in Philadelphia, it's going to be 10 years on a first offense. The word gets out, because I talk to criminals all the time. The word gets out. They all talk in these jails. When they realize that you can't get this easy judge over here or this judge over here, you got to go in front of one of these 6. You're screwed. And that's how you stop it.
Thank you. The next question is about criminal justice reform, which is something that has been recently attention to the large number of people who have been incarcerated in the United States, especially individuals of color, number of the population. What policies would you implement or continue in order to reduce the number of those incarcerated for low-level, non-violent crimes?
Well, it's very simple. I can't change the sentences of that were given out in the past. But what I want to concentrate on is guns and shootings. Stealing cars, criminal mischief, all these things where people are going to jail. I'm not concentrating on that. I'm not interested in that. Marijuana, people, crimes like that do not interest me, because public safety is not affected. The district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer in the county. Our number one goal is to keep you safe. You're not safe right now. And that's where I'm going to put all of my attention. And just by the energy that I put in that, the incarceration rates on the other crimes will go down. But make no mistake about it. You want to continue to be a criminal in even lesser crimes, you're going to go to jail.
Okay, you had mentioned victims' rights earlier, and that drives right into the next question. On May 5th, 2018, Mike Pong was shot during what looked like an attempted robbery. Further evidence showed that the shooter, Javon Patterson, had told a neighbor his intention to hurt Mr. Pong because he was tired of his mouth and something had to be done about it. Under the current district attorney's office, the charge of attempted murder was dropped and a plea deal was made to reduce the charge to aggravated assault. Under Pennsylvania's law, victims have the right to be apprised of plea deals prior to sentencing. Mr. Pong was never notified. In another case, the family of murder victim Antoine Jackson was not notified that the person accused of his murder was set free. In the case of Sergeant Robert Wilson, the district attorney's office did not notify the police officer's family until so late in the process that any input from the family would have been meaningless. As district attorney, the buck stops with the district attorney. What will you do as district attorney to make sure victims' rights are not violated?
Well, that's an easy question. You have to set up full-time lawyers and backup staff to make sure that victims know about the case, know what proceeding, and they're going to be in court. And you have to know in advance if they can't make it to court. So you go in advance and tell the judge, they can't be there that day. We don't want to inconvenience defense witnesses. We can't be ready that day. And you do that because when the defendants come in and they say, when you have a room full of victims and you're ready to proceed, and they say, well, we're not ready because I got to try a case somewhere else, or I didn't do this. I want the judge to be equal and say, no, you didn't come in advance. You didn't tell us about this. You're going to go on today. You got to have it equal on both sides. And it's our job to make sure that our witnesses are notified, our victims are notified, and to make sure that everybody feels like they got a fair shake. That's what the DA is all about. I want the people to leave the Justice Center and say, listen, I didn't get what I wanted, but I'm satisfied that it was fair. That's all we can do.
Carlos Vega said that with the availability of technology nowadays, you can find anybody. Do you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. You can find anybody. And there's so many snitches that work for the police department. It's almost laughable that you can't find somebody if you try. Most excuses that are put forward in courtrooms are laughable. I mean, they're just laughable. And I don't, I think they're stand-up comedians, some lawyers, because you could find somebody if you really want to find them. It's called effort.
A topic that has been discussed and debated for many years is bail reform. So what are your thoughts on that issue?
Well, bail reform is a misnomer. It's twisted to the point where people think that there's such a disparity in what's happening with bail that it's not fair. There are a few cases, and I mean maybe 10%, where there's an unfair system with bail. But when a person commits a heinous crime or a crime that makes us unsafe, such as a shooting, then I want bail so high that they're deprived of it, because I want them to be off the street because they're a danger to the community. So I don't want to hear about bail reform. And if I do hear about it, it's going to go in this year and come out this year. I don't care. However, for petty theft, where you're supposed to pay $1,000 and you don't have $1,000 and you sit in jail taking up one of our beds, that's where the problem is. So there's got to be more enforcement of our bail regulations that we already have. They're just not followed.
So your reform would more be targeted toward low-level, non-violent crimes?
Any crime of violence, there's going to be reform, all right. It's going to be reform this way, not this way.
Okay. As a city and a nation, we're currently in the throes of an opioid epidemic that has destroyed thousands of lives and families, millions of lives and families. What are your beliefs both on the prosecution of low-level offenses and the use of safe injection sites?
All right. First, the term safe injection sites is one of my favorite terms in the English language. I don't know what moron came up with that oxymoron, but how could you have a safe injection site? So what you do is you get all drug-dependent people on heroin to go into one place so they could all shoot up, be high together, safe in the sense that the cops aren't going to arrest them, and they could all compare notes. Hey, Joe, where'd you get your drugs? Oh, I got them from Fred. How much? $4. Phil, where'd you get yours? I got them from Ed. How much? $8. Oh, it's no good. Any good? Yeah, it was all right. I like his better, though. That's a brilliant idea. As a matter of fact, it was, who came up with this? Socrates? This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It probably came out either from Larry Krasner or Jim Kenney, because it comes from somebody who's high on heroin when they came up with the idea.
I don't know, because one of the big supporters of that was one of my favorite mayors, Ed Rendell.
Well, Ed Rendell has lost his mind. I thought back in the day he was a very good district attorney, and those words would have never left his lips when he was district attorney. But, he's getting a little old.
Well, one issue that is in the headlines constantly, and from the previous administration in Washington and now is immigration.
Yes.
And Mayor Kenny made Philadelphia into a sanctuary city. What is your opinion of that?
Well, I have a lot of opinions about Mayor Kenny. I think if we had 500 homicides last year, it would have maybe improved the city. But let me save that. Sanctuary city, for what? If you are here as an illegal immigrant and you're not committing one of the big five, and I'll tell you what that is, then the district attorney's office is not going to bother you under my regime. And why? Because we have to put our resources where they are needed, public safety. However, Mayor Kenny has sent a directive to our Philadelphia police that if you arrest an illegal alien, including for one of the big five, you are not to report them to ICE. You could lose your job and your pension for violating his directive of reporting this illegal alien to ICE. And that's why they're in and out of jail after they serve their time and there's no immigration detaining. Under my administration, if you are arrested for murder, rape, robbery, burglary, or arson, then we're going to notify ICE immediately that not only you're not going to make bail, but you're going to have an immigration detainer on you. And after you serve your lengthy sentence, then we're going to kick you out because we don't want you. If you're an illegal immigrant doing the right thing, trying to go towards citizenship and not bothering anybody, I don't care. I'm not going to use my resources to find you. I'm not going to report you to ICE. But if you want to commit one of the big five, bye-bye.
All right.
He's an entertaining guy.
Next question. Members of the LGBT community are too often underrepresented in city government. What policies do you plan to put into place so that your office hires members of the LGBT community?
Well, I'm going to tell you this right now. I'm going to hire qualified people, no matter what their background, but they have to be qualified. If somebody's gay, if somebody's transgender, if somebody's transsexual, and they're qualified, they get a job. They get a job.
That's it.
If they're not qualified, they don't get a job. I'm not going to worry about race, religion, sexual orientation, who you're for in the World Series. I don't care. I want qualified people, and I want to restore the integrity of the district attorney's office. And that means I want to have an elite core of district attorneys and former district attorneys to come back and prosecute, do their job, present evidence, take nothing from anybody, and put people in jail. And we're not doing that now.
So we can assume that some of the assistant district attorneys who were fired in the past few years, that you would bring some back.
I absolutely have been in contact with district attorneys who have been fired, and Carlos Vega is one of them. If Carlos Vega does not beat Larry Krasner, and I do, Carlos Vega will have a job offer from me. Absolutely 100%, because he was qualified and he was a good prosecutor.
Do you see this sort of laissez-faire attitude from the DA as contributing to the increase in homicides and
Yes.
other crimes?
Mr. Krasner, who's not here, has gone out of his way to hire lawyers from these very elite law schools, Stanford, Harvard, Yale. Hey, we got law schools right here in Philadelphia. We have Delaware, Drexel, Villanova, Penn, right here. You're going to tell me we can't hire from here? Now, let me tell you what the problem is at hiring out of town. Number one, they're not from Philadelphia. Number two, they don't know the neighborhoods of Philadelphia. And if you think when you're picking a jury, it's not important to know the neighborhoods, then you're high. Because let me tell you, when I pick a jury, I know the propensities of each area. And that goes a long way on who I want to put on a jury. And if you don't know, then you're at a disadvantage. And if you're at a disadvantage, I don't want you. So let's hire from right here within Philadelphia, not only because it's the right thing to do, because it's the better thing to do.
I can read the next question. We have many societal problems that need to be addressed by the civil authorities illegal immigration, homelessness, drug addiction. Please name one possible solution to one of those problems, either homelessness, drug addiction, or juvenile delinquency.
All right, I'm going to tell you this. The district attorney's office is limited. A lot of these questions are for the mayoral race, but I'll address it. Juvenile delinquency. That is going to be an elite unit that I want to set up in my administration, because dangerous offenders from 14 to 24, that 10-year period, and I mean 14, which is sad, they are future criminals. They're already hardened. Sometimes it's not their fault. And now listen what I'm going to say. Sometimes it's not their fault because of their upbringing. But because it's not their fault, that doesn't mean they're not going to go away. That's where Mr. KRASNER has failed us again. He is too sympathetic to their plight. Well, he didn't have a father, he didn't have a mother, he didn't have the opportunities in life. So let him out. So let him prey on the law-abiding citizens. Are you nuts? No. We might get him some treatment if at 14, 15. We might try to turn him around, and there's going to be some success there. We could hope for as high as 20 to 25% turnaround, but we're not going to get better than that, no matter what we do. And because of that, they have to be incarcerated. And everybody says, well, it's cruel, and Larry's on record is doing this. 14 and 15, putting them in, trying them as adults. Hey, you want to have a shootout with drug dealers and you're 14 and 15? I don't want you on my streets. I don't care if you're 5. Goodbye. What happened to you is a shame, but that's a society problem. District attorney is to keep you safe.
Okay. I think we're going to do one more question, and then we're going to go to the Zoom. Do you want to ask the question, Mr. Mendez, in regard to the legalization of marijuana?
I could follow with that.
Okay.
The marijuana, whether or not you are opposed to legalizing marijuana, or are you?
Well, a lot of people, when they just saw the first hour of this interview, they might think I'm high right now. So how could I be against it? I don't care about legalization of marijuana.
It's medicinal.
It's so far down the list of my priorities, I can't even smell it. Honestly, people want to get high, have a ball. You want to go into a park and smoke a joint? I'm not going to arrest you. I'm not going to prosecute you if the cops arrest you. The only thing that bothers me is if you live across the street from a school and you're smoking on your stoop, then you're just an idiot. So you should be arrested for idiocy of the first degree. Stop it. As long as you use your head, and which is a wrong term when we're talking about legalization of marijuana, then nobody's going to bother you, because it's way down on my list of priorities. Am I going to prosecute marijuana cases? No. Am I going to prosecute marijuana cases because the cops saw fit to arrest you because you're smoking right in front of kids? Yeah.
You don't agree with what some of the states are doing now, where they have these dispensaries to sell it legally?
I don't care where they get it. If they buy it legally and they have this physical problem that marijuana is going to help, which I doubt, but I'm not going to debate that. Have a ball. Just don't do it in front of our kids. You take kids out of the equation, I don't care about marijuana unless you're selling 100 pounds of it.
If it is legalized, would you support expunging the records of those who are previously prosecuted for the selling or use of marijuana?
For the use of marijuana, absolutely, across the board. For selling of marijuana, I have to look at it as on a case-by-case basis. Is he selling an ounce? Is he selling 100 pounds? I'm not going to expunge, because expunge is like it never happened. Other things could be done, sealed, things like that, which people have to understand. Expunge, it never happened. Sealed, corporate America can't find it, so it's not going to hurt your job ability. But law enforcement knows it if you ever do it again. So it's not going to be expunged. It will be sealed, but on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up the questions from Fernando and I. Now we're going to bring in residents who have questions, and we're going to bring them in via Zoom, and they're going to ask you those questions directly.
Yes, Mr. PERUTO. My name is Suave Gonzalez, and I got a question. In 2008, the United States Supreme Court ruled that you cannot keep a person that committed a crime under the age of 18 in prison for the rest of his life, if you become prosecutor, will you respect the United States Supreme Court decision when it comes to juveniles?
Well, I will always respect the law because my job is to enforce the law, not to write the laws. But if a kid 16 years old commits first-degree murder, and we're not debating if it's first-degree murder, it's a given in this hypothetical situation. If he commits first-degree murder, planned, premeditated, deprived murder, then I'm going to prosecute him for first-degree murder. If the courts down the line say, no, you can't keep him for life, that's fine. That's fine. 30 years, 35 years, might straighten anybody out. So I don't have a problem with that, but I'm going to prosecute you for first-degree murder. And if the Supreme Court of the United States says I can't, I'm going to try anyway.
Okay, and do you agree or disagree with lifetime parole for juvenile offenders?
I think what you mean to say is, do I agree that juvenile offenders should be able to get parole before they serve their natural life in jail? Is that what you mean?
No. Do you agree that a person that served 35, 40 years in prison and is out now deserves to be on parole for the rest of his life?
Well, I don't really have an opinion on that. If the parole board believes that they need to be supervised, I'm not going to infringe on them. But honestly, if you'd served 35 years and you were released because you never had an infraction in jail, then you're probably not going to have an infraction out here. So I don't have any problem with terminating that. I mean, it sounds like the person just earned his way out of jail. And if they earned their way out of jail, I think they should be free in society.
Thank you.
The next question is from Greg Gorski. Can you hear us, Greg?
Start again. Hi, Mr. Peruto. Thank you for being here today. On January 13th, 2021, Milan Lonkar, a Temple University graduate, was shot and killed in his Brewerytown neighborhood while walking his dog. One of the suspects, Josephus Davis, was released just 2 weeks prior to Milan's murder on just $3,200 of bail. Mr. Davis was charged with a separate violent carjacking on an Uber driver and paid just $2,000 bail. As district attorney, what policies would you introduce so that the murder of Milan Lonkar or murders like Milan Lonkar won't happen again?
Well, that's an easy question. He should never have been on the street, period. I saw Larry KRASNER crying on TV because a commissioner or a judge lowered the bail over their objection. That's a bunch of poppycock because no appeal was filed by the district attorney's office. You know, as a defense lawyer and as DA, you get roughed up by judges sometimes. You go in, you make your pitch, and the judge finds against you. That's why we have what is called appeal. And the district attorney has a right to appeal just like a defense does. So you ask for a stay of the judge's order, and then you appeal. Well, you can't win an appeal if you don't file one. And in none of those cases did Larry KRASNER appeal a low bail. What he has done is across the board, blanketly asked for $1 million bail, and he's been doing this for the last year because for the first 2 years he did nothing. So now he wants to ask for $1 million bail across the board for anybody arrested with a gun. Well, that grows tire when a judge, because a judge looks at the DA and says, okay, you're going to ask for $1 million bail again, I know. And they're not going to get it because they lose their credibility with the court. They ask for it in every case. What you have to do is look at every case. We have software now that can put all of the required information in front of the assistant district attorney, making the bail out there. You make those arguments. You have that individual's background from every state in the country instantaneously. And if you don't like what the judge does, you appeal it. But you don't make a blanket argument across the board in all cases. Prosecutions are individual. No two cases are the same. No two judges are the same. No two defendants are the same, and no two prosecutors are the same. It's up to the district attorney to make sure you have qualified people who do the right thing and exhaust every remedy available to them. And if they did that in this case, he would be alive today.
All right, thanks for your question, Greg. The next question we're going to bring on via Zoom is from Robert Ryan. Can you hear me, Robert?
I can hear you. Good afternoon, Mr. Peruto. In the last few years, numerous assistant district attorneys, other staff members of the current district attorney's office, and the district attorney's current communications director have made anti-police, anti-Republican, and racist statements via social media. In addition, few staffers of the current district attorney's office have been arrested. Can you respond how you would address this type of rhetoric on social media? And what would you do for those members who are getting arrested who work for the current district attorney's office?
Well, nobody's going to like this answer, but I'm going to tell you now. It's not going to be a surprise when I take office. I'm going to demand a resignation of about half of the assistant district attorneys that work there now and re-interview them to see if they're qualified for a job, because I would say half of that office is not qualified to be a Philadelphia district attorney. It used to be a very prestigious office. When you have people saying things about the police, the arm of the district attorney's office who gathers the evidence, they make the arrest, you use them as witnesses. There is like open air warfare between the police right now and the DA. They should be working together, not calling them names and saying this about Republicans and committing crimes. This is a failure on the part of Mr. KRASNER in his liberal methods of hiring and disciplining and running that office. And you could be as liberal as you want in any other office, but not as the chief law enforcement officer of the county. There's no room to be liberal in that office. You're the prosecutor. Your job is to seek public safety for all people. And he hasn't done that. And that's the product that we have, is the assistant DAs that he's hired doing these things.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So we have one more question from, I'll say, the audience. Wayne has the next question. Wayne, can you hear me?
Yes. I have a few questions. One is the proposal that you made in reference to the gun, how to address the gun violence in the courts. You stated that you would pick 6 judges that would handle those particular cases. And I remember from back in the day when I was out committing crime, they had placed me in a particular program, and it did not afford me a fair trial. But this particular program that I was placed in, and eventually it was overturned by the courts. This is when they was addressing the issue of career criminals, and they used to bring you into court, and your file will be red, and everybody else's file was yellow. So that particular thing did not provide me with a fair trial, because why? I was already prejudiced with the red folder when everybody else got yellow folders. And so I'm saying, I'm just wondering that this program that you are talking about in terms of you appointing, getting to appoint 6 judges just to handle the gun cases. Let me say this. I support that something should be done about the gun cases, but also I understand that you have to do it in a legal way to address that. And I'm just wondering that this program that you're talking about, would it be legal?
Well, I certainly wouldn't do anything illegal. I'm going to go to the Board of Judges to speak about our epidemic of gun violence and ask for their support, ask for their help. Because they're public servants, just like the district attorney. And I want to form a partnership with them to give me these 6 judges. And we're talking about crimes of violence where a gun is used, not talking about cases that go into a program. We're talking about our safe streets policy. I'm going to have the most elite district attorneys and former district attorneys man these courtrooms, these gun cases. And I want the word to get out, because the word does get out. I want the word to get out. If you leave your house with a gun and you don't even use it, goodbye. You might as well close the door and say goodbye to your family, because you're not going to see them for 2 years on a first offense. That might seem onerous, but we're in a war. This is warfare. You have to take drastic measures in a drastic situation. And I'm going to handle this like I'm a general in an army, because we are at war.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. And
I got 2 more questions.
Okay, quickly, please.
Okay, they'll be quick. The next question is that the city of Philadelphia had passed the reporting of lost and stolen gun law to address the illegal transfer of guns into the hands of the unauthorized. My question is, would you pursue and prosecute that particular ordinance that was passed by the city of Philadelphia?
Absolutely. That was a very important ordinance, and it's really to track people who are claiming their gun was lost and they're really transferring it to somebody else. The straw purchase of guns. There's so many of these drug dealers who have a record. They can't go into the gun shop and they have their paramour, one of their girlfriends go in and buy a gun for them. That girl is going to know, because it's going to be advertised. The word's going to be out. If you buy a gun for someone else as a straw purchase, and I've had cases where the criminal goes in, feels the gun, likes the gun, he's aiming it in the gun shop, puts it down, and then the girl comes in and buys it. It's so obvious who the gun is for. They're going to go to jail for 2 years.
I got one more question.
And the only way they get out of it is by cooperating. And the relationship is now over between the girl and the guy, because she's either going to finger him and testify against him, or she's going to go to jail herself. But transferring of guns, it's got to stop. Very onerous, that measure that I'm talking about. It's horrible for some people. So then don't do it. Because my job is to not punish people who commit crimes. I want to prevent the crimes from happening in the first place. It does us no good to prosecute 500 murderers for last year. I want the murder rate to decrease to under 200, which is still a lot. But I'm not going to get it below that without extreme help. And if we can do that, then I'll feel satisfied I did my job. But it's going to happen. It's going to happen, because when people get put away for these gun cases, the word's going to get out and they're going to have less guns on the street.
One more question and I'll be finished. Since you are being supported by the FOP, I'm just wondering, would you prosecute officers who kill unarmed people?
I didn't understand that last part of the question.
Would you prosecute officers who killed an unarmed person?
Absolutely. If a police officer kills an unarmed person without justification, that's a crime. I'm the chief law enforcement officer in the city. I prosecute criminals. If they're accused of such a crime, I'm going to prosecute them. I'm going to accuse them. However, that means they did something that is true in your hypothetical, that they shot somebody unjustifiably. Unjustifiably means the person was no danger to them and they shot him anyway. Those cops are going to be prosecuted. And for that reason, I was not endorsed by the FOP, just so you know, because I gave that answer before. If a cop commits a crime, he's going to get prosecuted. The question becomes, did they commit a crime? And that has to be weighed before you just lock cops up for no reason like Mr. KRASNER is doing.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to wrap things up. Charles PERUTO, thank you very much. I apologize for the change of format at the last minute, because Mr. KRASNER did not show up.
I was actually happy that the way the format went, because I can safely say that I won this debate. So I'm now 1-0 against Mr. KRASNER.
want to thank you to the listeners. I'm going to thank Mr. Mendez. I'm going to sign up for Musala. And if you want to do a
Español,
Spanish.
sí. Señores clientes de Usala Media, hemos terminado esta sesión de hoy especial con los candidatos a District Attorney de la ciudad de Filadelfia. Muchas gracias por su sintonía. Hasta la próxima.
Usala Media, bringing you the best programming.